Welcome back to Teach Me to Dive, part 2 with Jill Heinerth, the force of nature diver who has explored the depths of, well, everywhere. Absolutely. She is absolutely amazing. Now, again, my name is Benjamin Hadfield. I'm a technical dive instructor with Teach Me to Dive, and I connect divers with dive shops, dive agencies, and dive locations around the world for quality education and awesome diving as well. So now we have some seriously valuable insights coming your way. So make sure to subscribe to our channel, as well as hit that like button for future notifications of amazing interviews like this. You're not going to want to miss a second of the oceanic goodness we have in store. Now in this part 2, we're going to start off with the big questions for Jill. Jill, thanks for coming back for part 2.
My pleasure. Thanks.
So I'm going to jump into this is the biggest question and my favorite question of all the questions we have, to be honest with you. Christina Zanata, who we all love and respect immensely, Women Diver Hall of Fame and all that, she asked the question, what was the loudest doubt you heard in your head? And as you move forward with your plans, what did you do to quiet it down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was on a call with Christina last night and a bunch of early career ocean professional women, and we talked about imposter syndrome, and that's really loud for women. And still today, I mean, I'm 58 years old, and there are times when my husband takes my face in his hands and he goes, honey, you really did that. You really did that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I did. But yeah, there are a lot of times where you think, wow, am I the right voice for this? Or yeah, I don't know. Imposter syndrome. It's just, it's uncomfortable sometimes to, celebrate yourself or your work, I guess. Yeah, that's a loud voice that constantly takes quieting and help. And I give a lot of credit to my incredible husband who it's totally there as my support structure for everything. But he grounds me, but he also says, hey, it's okay. You can take a victory lap here, dear.
That's absolutely amazing. So we talked earlier that there are no failures in life, just opportunities to learn more, to grow, to take that point and do more. But we all have setbacks. I mean, and that we certainly learn from them. What do you feel was the biggest setback in your diving career?
When I got bent. Yeah. So I got bent pretty badly, good 20 plus years ago. And the doctor told me never dive again. And I was devastated. It's like, okay, this is everything about who I am and what I do, and this is my career. What do you mean never dive again? And that was a really scary time because first I had to recover from the hit and then take an appropriate amount of time off just to let my body heal. But those little baby steps back into the water, one at a time, were pretty scary too. Yeah.
That's a big one. To definitely get bent. What happened? How did you get bent?
I was diving exploration in the jungle in Mexico, and we had just discovered this deep cave system at a place called the Pit that a lot of people go to today. And my husband and I were in the jungle. We had actually planned to have a support team out there with us supporting our dives, but life was getting busy in the Yucatan, and at the last minute, all those people worked for one operation, and they were like, they won't let us take off work. But we decided to kind of forge ahead with what we were doing anyway. And 2 days of very deep dives, almost 400 feet deep, which was the first mistake, 2 days in a row of that. I got bent, and it was quite remote in the jungle. So I ended up treating myself on site before coming out and still doing another 3 runs in a recompression facility in Playa after I hiked out of the jungle. Yeah.
Wow. So Jill, our industry is fraught with risk and risk management. Can you tell us about the biggest risk you've taken and how did you overcome it?
Well, there are no easy dives. So, I would not necessarily say the greatest risk is my deepest dive or my longest dive or anything like that. There's no easy dives. I mean, you're going into an environment where you can't breathe water. And in my case, most of the time I'm going into an overhead environment where, the answers and the solutions are outside the cave, and the only person or the best person to save you is already in there. It's you. Yeah. So, I think it's important to, really be kind of, true and recognize the fact that there are no easy dives. And so you have to take that same approach to safety and vigilance every time you go diving.
That's wonderful. So what do you feel is being done daily to introduce more women into the sport? And that comes from another one of our instructor friends.
Well, I think more and more women are visible as active divers, of all sorts, and that is what women need. Really, we need to see ourselves in the community. We also need gear that fits and keeps us warm, and that's been one of my crusades through the decades as well, is to encourage the development of gear that's not just small men's gear, but gear that is truly sized and developed for women. Because if we're warm and comfortable in the water, we're going to dive. If we're uncomfortable and freezing our butts off, then, we're going to say, all right, I'll find something else to do.
Absolutely. And that's something I've had the opportunity. I certify my wife in Sidemount. And so learning the difference of understanding that women have hips was definitely interesting, and having to make some fairly significant, I felt, modifications to the system that we were putting her in to get her through that process. So
oh, good for you. Because so many people just kind of offer up gear to women, and it's like, oh yeah, here you go. I don't understand why you're having problems. But especially when it comes to side mounted, it really is a personal fitting experience. I mean, it's like fitting a bike for a racing cyclist. Our neck to head ratio is different than men. Our necks are smaller. That's why it's tough for us to get a dry suit on. Our shoulders slope down and they're narrower. So harnesses fall off our shoulders, many times because of the way they're designed. They're just too wide. Even for me, a big, tall woman, the chest straps aren't movable, and then they're absolutely crushing your breasts. Your torso is much shorter than a man's torso. And so the entire proportion of especially a side mount rig has to be different for a woman. Thankfully we have curves as hips that come in handy for some aspects, but in other aspects, it's just not even considered, and a harness doesn't fit us properly. So it really does take a lot of time, and the kind of instructor like yourself that's willing to take that time individually with someone, understanding that every body proportion is different, and a student deserves that personal touch to make it right.
Absolutely. The aha moment for me, just it's interesting you brought it up as well, kind of through that. It was, we had my wife wanted a chest strap, and I put it where I felt it should be. And we had a disagreement about that. And she was less than pleased about my placement. And finally she looked at me and says, "Sweetheart, I have breasts. It doesn't go there."
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we've got to deal with that. And then the dry suit inflation valve, there really is a very small space that's perfectly comfortable that keeps that harness from peeling off your shoulders. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. And it's one of the reasons I've moved to a one-on-one on all side mount in initial consultations, developments, and fittings.
Cool.
You can't do it as a group. It just doesn't work. We're all different shapes and sizes. Nick Hollis was wonderful, and he built the Katana 2 just for me. I swear, I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds. It's perfect for me. But
me too. I love that.
So many students that are not designed, they're not built like me, and so very few of my students are built like me. They're all different. Well, Jill, moving on. Everyone has a role model and a mentor in our life that has taken us and helped us through the process. Who's your role model?
Yeah, I have a few. There's one that's really in the front of my mind right now because he just passed away a couple days ago. But Phil Newton, a great Canadian oceaneering engineer, explorer, who I don't think has ever had the kind of attention that he so richly deserves. He passed away at 81 just a couple of days ago. But if you've ever seen the One Atmosphere Newt suit, that little bumblebee looking thing, Phil designed that. Phil invented that. If you've ever seen the Deep Worker subs on the National Geographic programs, a tiny little personal submarine that someone sits in, like it's actually a submarine built around an first class aircraft seat. Phil developed that. I mean, Phil was a part of developing early decompression procedures and some of the earliest deep misgax diving. And he's always been really encouraging to me, an absolutely brilliant Renaissance man that mixes sort of engineering and art. And so I've been thinking about him a lot recently. But, people like Sylvia Earle and Jane Goodall were totally high in my list of inspirational women in exploration.
That's amazing. There's so many great role models. We always wonder, who does somebody like Jill Heinerth look up to? And Sylvia Earle is definitely a great one, and so is Phil. They've definitely amazing people, and their careers were unbelievable, to say the least. Mm-hmm. So throughout our diving career, there's always those awe-inspiring, just breathtaking moments, and it's not always the biggest dives. You and I've done some pretty good dives. Yours are certainly Everest above mine, but for sure. But it's not always those biggest dives. What have been your most awe-inspiring, breathtaking moments during diving?
Oh boy, I've had some really good ones. I'm whether it's being on the floe edge in the Arctic and with belugas and narwhals, or in the midst of 100 humpbacks feeding on capelin off the east coast of Newfoundland. That's awesome. But the small pleasures are amazing too. Like I'm working on Canada's longest underwater cave system that's absolutely full of mussels, bivalves, and it took me 2 years to be in the right place at the right time to photograph a particular behavior that these mussels have. It was just mind blowing to me, and I finally, got the shot, got the image, and that was really exhilarating for me. And it's just all about a little mussel.
Absolutely, it's not always the big things.
Yeah.
It's, some of our favorite moments are finding the mantis shrimp and just enjoying watching him come out and do his little things.
Absolutely.
So those are the ones, at least for me. So now, have you noticed any positive changes or progress in terms of gender equality in the last few years in the industry?
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. I mean, certainly when I go and I do dive shows like in Singapore, if you go out to Asia, there's more women in diving than there are men, and there's this whole new movement of mermaid divers as well, which is kind of fun, sort of like free diving in costume, really. And so there's a huge movement of underwater women in Asia, and that's good. That's going to spill over. So I think that's an improvement. The whole industry is changed in so many ways. I mean, we used to gather in huge hordes at dive shows and things, back 25 and 30 years ago. And a lot of those are much smaller. And that means that like every dive shop is kind of reinventing themselves into some sort of a specialty focus that serves their customers better. So I hope that we're kind of like on that cusp of creating more clubhouse style dive shops where, it's not just a shop, it's a lifestyle, and, bring the whole family in. And I think that's a really good direction for the industry.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I always kind of saw most dive shops as clubs, but certainly broadening that out into a clubhouse where all are welcome, and let's make this a fun family sport is definitely something we need to look at. So what advice would you give to aspiring divers and explorers who are just starting their journey out?
Oh, wow. I guess, know that anything is possible if you want to achieve it. Like, I mean, I had someone email me the other day and they're like, I'm already 37. Is that too late to dive? And I'm like, no, I'm going to be cave diving when I'm 80. So 37 is fine to get started. So anything's possible. That's the beauty about diving, right? It doesn't matter what background, culturally, what gender, what size, what color, anything about you, right? As soon as we're submerged, we're all mermaids, right? We all have the chance to float neutrally buoyant in paradise and move like a dancer and, remove gravity, and suddenly we have equality underwater. And I think that's one of the things that really attracts me to diving.
That's amazing. Now, how has your perspective throughout this process changed on your environmental ideas and what you think about underwater exploration?
Yeah, when I started diving, it was for the thrill of seeing what was there, the opportunity to go where no one had been before. I know that sounds so cliche, but that's what attracted me to diving. But today in my work, what attracts me to particular projects and work is doing something that matters. Like I'm not in this for adrenaline. I'm not even in it for sightseeing. As much as I like to take pictures and video and capture the moment, I'm really in this now to do work that matters. Like if I'm going to take a risk, I want to be able to do that sort of on behalf of people that can't go there. So do the outreach that communicates to people about water issues and global climate change and the situation of sea ice in the north. And so I realized like I am a canary in the coal mine. I get to see things and document things that can inform the public about how to move forward and solve some of these like desperate global issues that we face today.
Good point. What do you think is the biggest environmental challenge we're currently facing?
Water issues. Yeah, water issues and climate change. I mean, they're so intertwined. Like there's plenty of water on this planet, but we're running out of clean, fresh drinking water sources that we can afford. And, whether you look to the drought in the West and the challenges for agriculture, or, you look at water supply issues like bad quality drinking water, even, in America, that's nothing compared to the rest of the world. And unless we have clean, fresh drinking water for everyone on the planet, then we're going to live in a world of conflict. Because anyone would admit that if their child is dying of thirst, which will happen in 3 days, you would do anything to save them. And as long as that's the situation, there will be impoverished, desperate people looking for water for sustenance.
It's true. What can we do to be better friends with the environment?
Well, I think everybody needs to recognize the reality of global climate change and water issues, and we all need to think about how we can live a little lighter on the face of the planet. We face lifestyle changes ahead. No one can deny that their children are going to live a different life than we have lived in our generation. But I think we have some more very serious changes to face moving forward. We've got to use less fossil fuels. We've got to use less stuff. We've got to reuse more. We've just got to be better environmental stewards. And if you feel like, well, there's nothing I can do, this problem is too big, then you're wrong, because it takes the collective small actions of everybody to make a difference. And maybe all that will do will buy us a bit of time before engineers and technologists come up with the big solutions. But we all have to recognize we're part of the problem, and that little things that we do can and will make a difference.
I agree. If we all come together with little things, it becomes a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we learned through cave diving, through technical diving, is if you take care of all the little things, the big things take care of themselves all by themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, that do the little things. So what are some of those significant lessons you've learned from your experiences as a cave diver, as an explorer, as an author through this process?
Well, I tell people I'm swimming through the veins of Mother Earth. I'm literally in the sustenance of the planet. So I am swimming through that water that serves humanity and wildlife, and even all of the industries that we, live on. So, when I'm swimming through that environment, I'm really at the beginning of the pipe. Although I do see the influence of things that happen on the surface of the earth. Like if you take water from a spring in a cave and it looks so clear and beautiful, it's not necessarily clean. So there are a lot of chemicals that have not been filtered out as the water has soaked into the ground. There's nitrates, there's phosphates, there's birth control, there's antidepressants, there's all kinds of things in the water. And the water that comes out of that cave feeds a stream or a spring basin, that feeds a creek, that feeds a river, that eventually reaches the Gulf of Mexico, that eventually intermingles with the Atlantic Ocean. And, it's the interconnectedness that I've felt and learned about quite viscerally. And my conclusion about all of that is that wherever you live on this planet, the ocean begins beneath your feet, and anything that you apply on the surface of the earth may be returned to you to drink or breathe, because the ocean and the health of the ocean is critical for the production of oxygen that we breathe on this planet. And when you see yourself as that kind of a global citizen connected all the way to the ocean, even if you live, far from the water, then you can't help but change the way you live and do things.
That's absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Janine Spruill, who lives in Utila and teaches there, is an amazing instructor. She asks, what would you tell yourself as a baby diver if you could go back in time?
I would tell myself that when the internet comes around and people start writing comments and stuff, ignore them. They're not about you. Yeah.
Fair enough. Other than the internet, what would you tell yourself as
a baby diver? Yeah, I would say it's worth the struggle. Like in those early days, there were some pretty serious struggles, and it's worth it. Just forge on, be resilient. Yeah, don't take no for an answer.
Absolutely. As a young Marine, I had a mentor pull me aside and says, "Be a duck. Let the crap just roll off your wings."
Yes, indeed.
A lot of lessons learned from ducks, apparently.
Yeah.
So, how do you currently use your platform to influence and raise awareness about ocean conservation and environmental issues?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I try to be subtle. I think, it's important to recognize that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And it's stuff that people hold really close to their heart. They have very strong opinions about. And sometimes like environmental issues, unfortunately, are spilling into like political stripes. And so I always remind myself that I need to be an educator, like just, there's no stupid question out there. Ask it. I'll never treat you stupidly when I give an answer. I'll give you the facts as best I can, but without making you feel stupid, I guess. Like I still get people all the time that come up to me at presentations and they say, so do you actually believe in climate change? And I'm like, yeah, well, let's start with, it's not a question of belief. And here's why. But I have to give them the information. Like there was a man that came up to me the other day and he said, I don't believe in this whole sea level rise thing. I mean, I sit on my back deck with an ice cube in my drink and when that ice cube melts, the sea level in the drink doesn't rise. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, fair enough. But when the water gets warmer, we have something called thermal expansion that makes a huge, huge difference. And our oceans are getting warmer. And the ice that's in that drink isn't an iceberg. I'm not worried about the icebergs. I'm actually worried about what comes off the ice shelf in Antarctica or Greenland, because it's like taking an entire bag of ice and trying to pour it into that like pint glass. Then it spills over. Mm-hmm. So when the ice moves from land to sea, that's when we're in trouble. And that's what's happening right now. And so he kind of went, oh, okay, I never really thought about it that way. But this was a man that was very entrenched in there is no sea level rise. There's no global warming. This is just some, earth cycle kind of thing. So people need information. They need metaphors to make it easily digestible. And when you give that to them, then you may have a chance of swaying their minds.
That's always an amazing thing. We can actually sway a fervent vine that has made a decision of what he believes. Mm-hmm. So that's one of my favorite things in life, is when I can sway somebody outside of their own opinion, or somebody can sway me. I'll admit it. I'm, as a former Marine and as, a hard-headed male, a member of the species, I tend to have my opinions. And so when I get swayed, I love that. I enjoy that. And I'm usually complimentary. Thank you. Even better when I have a class I like to teach called Science of Diving. I enjoy it thoroughly, and I had a MD come in, and he swayed my opinion of how some of the medical maladies happen. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. I've changed my thought process, and so when somebody changes another, it's a wonderful and special experience. So good for you.
My husband and I always say that there's 4 words that can save and nurture a marriage. And the 4 words are, I might be wrong.
I'm going to not note that down, and I'm going to use it with my wife tonight. It's instead of
I
just
might be wrong.
My favorite word. My wife and I don't spat, but I use the yes, dear. I get it. I'm happy to be away.
Yeah.
So, Jill, what advice would you give to women who are aspiring to enter the fields like diving and exploration?
I would say first, know that nothing is impossible. You may have, a few more things to juggle and navigate as a woman in this still fairly, male dominated career area. But know that everything is possible, and probably the best thing you can do is to make connections with other women, reach out and learn from others that have gone before you. And also know that there's support out there. There are, scholarship and training grants and organizations that can offer, financial support for some endeavors. And so, look for those too. And informal and formal partnership opportunities help.
What is the best way for women in this industry that are entering the field to begin networking and start that process?
The internet has all the answers, basically. So whether it's, training grants and funds and scholarships, you find those online. Local diving groups, women's diving groups are popping up everywhere. I was just out on Vancouver Island, and they have more than 500 women in the Vancouver Island Women Underwater group, and they support each other. So look to places like that. And it just, if you are interested in a grant or something like that, just apply. What's the worst that could happen? Someone could say no. Well, we all have piles of rejection letters in our life, but keep moving forward. Yeah.
You increase your odds of getting a yes substantially by simply asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Who should women reach out to? I mean, to help move this process along, are you able to or available to for women to reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. You can always reach out to me on my website at intotheplanet.com. But things like the Women Divers Hall of Fame, we give out almost $100,000 in training grants and scholarship opportunities every year. There are lots of them for all different ages, and a few for men as well. But there's also, you can become an associate member of the organization. And like last night, we had a mentoring panel for all these women. And there's other organizations too. Like here in Canada, we have something called ECOP Canada, which is Early Career Ocean Professionals Canada. And all of those women are, supporting each other and helping with opportunities and outreach as well. So connect yourself with a group. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And I think the biggest thing I'm taking from this is have no fear. There's no losses through this process. My wife asked me the other day, she says, how do you get these amazing people like Jill Heinerth to agree to interviews? And I says,
just ask.
I reached out, I asked, and they said yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just I think that's probably the big takeaway is reach out to somebody like you and ask.
Yeah.
What's worst going to happen? You say no? Oh, okay. Well, I've been told no before, and I'll be told no again. It's definitely not a new experience.
And volunteering is also a really good way to get involved. I mean, I would say that volunteering has really opened up most of the doors for me in my career. So early on, finding a project that I wanted to get involved in, and then I reach out and say, hey, what can I do how can I help? And those turned into huge opportunities in my life.
That's amazing. So the last question for you, Jill. I mean, this has been wonderful, and I honestly, I've got 500 more that I could easily ask and would enjoy having longer conversations with. But let's end with what does the future look like for Jill Heinerth?
Well, keeping diving. 58 years young. I plan to be diving for a long time yet. I've got a lot more work in Canada this summer just to kind of slow down the travel schedule a little bit. But this fall, I mean, you can look for a new featured documentary that's being shot about my life right now by an Australian film crew. So they're in the edit phase right now. But if you want a more immediate look, you can go to the new Apple TV kids program called Jane, based on Jane Goodall. And I'm in the first episode, swimming with polar bears.
Well, there we go. We'll go look. We'll go watch Jane, and we'll look for the documentary coming out about you. I'm excited. Mm-hmm. So, who plays you in the movie? I guess is the magic question.
Well, it's a documentary, so we're using a lot of archival footage and some reenactments, and so I'm me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's always the question. If you could choose somebody to play you in a movie, who would it be?
Yeah.
Jill, thank you so much. You've been very gracious with your time today. I definitely appreciate you. I know you're very busy. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, great to talk to you too.
Wow. There you have it. Part 2 of an amazing 2-part interview series with Jill Heinerth, the woman, the myth, the legend, the force of nature. She is absolutely amazing and wonderful. She's been very gracious with her time, and I certainly appreciate it. If you have a chance, make sure you go check out her website and check her out on social media as well. She's not hard to find, that is for sure, because she's everywhere. In caves, in icebergs, on the internet, she's everywhere and absolutely amazing. And I'm extremely grateful for her time with us today. Now, in these 2-part interviews, we talked about a lot. And if you haven't watched part 1, please go back and check out part 1 because it's just as good as part 2. Jill has been a wonderful and inspiring guest for us and for me as well personally. Again, thank you, Jill, for your time.